So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and I'm going to try and make my way through the backlog, at least with regards to some of the larger set-piece battles I've been given, because I do want to try and get through some of the stuff that people have given me a little bit further in the past to try and give some sort of structure to how I actually, do replays, because really all I do is pick them randomly, as long as I haven't done the map somewhat recently. Lake EVENDIM wasn't too long ago that I showed off this map last, but I feel as though it's been long enough where I can just about get away with it without making things too stale. But I do want to try and get through some of the backlog, because I do get sent quite a lot of larger battles from people, and I do want to start making my way through that. But yeah, this is going to be a 4v4 as well. Lake EVENDIM is kind of an interesting map with regards to how it can work out, because of course the engagements can be quite narrow, and it is interesting. Like, over on this side tends to be where the epicenter of the battle happens, and then there's often flanking forces that go around this side of the map, and sort of a smaller engagement happens, and whoever wins this smaller engagement then tends to be able to sneak around the back with a smaller force to try and make the difference there. But depending on how much you commit over to this side, of course, can affect how well this fight over here on the main banks of the lake tend to go for you as well. So yeah, it's going to be quite an interesting one. I think a 4v4 as well, so there's going to be a lot of carnage here over on this side of the lake, I would imagine. This one was sent to me by Inarius, but he's going to be on the blue team. We'll start off, I think, by going on to the red team because we're closer to them. Starting off with Clem, who's going to be playing as Gondor, which in this sort of situation, where the engagements are going to be narrow and maybe a little bit more atrocious, Gondor, I think, are a very good faction to have on your team, because it's exactly the sort of engagement they like to be a part of. You can see here the Gondorian archers, as far as standard human archers go, with sort of heavier armour, they are pretty decent in a skirmish fight, although they don't have both their levels of armour upgrade, which really makes them stand out against this kind of unit amongst the Western Kingdoms of men. So they're not as good as they could be, but they'll still do a job. They'll still skirmish relatively comfortably on the front line with most lower tier archers, and if nothing else, they're just going to be decent numbers on the front line to commit. We also have some marksmen of Andros over here, of course, who come with their full plate armor. You don't need to upgrade their armor in order to make them that strong. But also, they are better as archers. Their stats at range are better, but of course, the best thing about the marksmen of Andros in my mind is the fact that they are very accomplished in melee as well. Pulling out their swords and wielding them two-handed means that they have a lot of base damage, a decent amount of melee defense as well, which makes them a very multifaceted unit and a very good part of the Gondorian line. Just in behind them, we have some guards of Osgiliath as well, which are a good choice in a map like this, obviously, because with the narrow engagement, having pikes on the front line can really shore things up for you. Albeit they are still rather vulnerable to arrow fire. Among pikes, they do have pretty decent armour. You can see there the scale mail coats that they wear, as well as the metal plates on their arms and shoulders. But having said that, they will still be a good anchor to the Gondorian line, but they do need to be careful of enemy archers, because they would be the sort of thing that I would try and target, just because anything that's unshielded is fair game. Again, Clem seems to have foregone the upgrading of the armour on Gondor, which is rare because Gondor's armour upgrades are cheaper than most. So to see them largely without it is kind of a strange sight, honestly. We have several units of Gondorian spearmen, just wearing the tabards and mail, just like everyone else. Guards of Osgiliath over here as well. The Gondor spearmen are a very basic unit of spears, of course. They aren't anything too special in melee, but they do have that shield wall ability. They're not overly expensive, so you can definitely pack your line with them. Got some Pelagear Marines as well. Javelins, of course, are a very useful part of any army, whether it's to bombard an infantry line or to zone out heavy cavalry. We do have Gondorian infantry over here as well. Interestingly enough, he does have the first level armour upgrades on this unit with their sort of shoulder plates, but nothing else. And he has other units back here as well. Actually, he has the upgrades on all of these units, so he's upgraded his Gondor infantry by one level at least. And in this case, I would say that's probably the better choice. The Gondorian infantry is going to be very useful on the front line because they're better in melee against infantry units than the spearmen that are in front of them. And it's unlikely that cavalry is going to be hugely decisive in this battle. It may be, but we shall see. We've got some Axemen of Lasarnak, who once again are without their armour upgrade, so they act as sort of very basic human axemen. What really sets them apart once again is the fact that when you upgrade their armour by 2 levels, for what they cost, they are a very sturdy unit of axemen, but if you don't upgrade the armour, you can tell just from looking at them that they're not overly durable. And again, they're going to be exactly the sort of unit which enemy archers are going to want to get a hold of. And then just in behind them, the mighty Wardens of the White Tower with the general in there. I would have to say that the Royal Legion of Armenelos have kind of stolen the Wardens of the White Tower's thunder, and certainly become the most effective sword and board unit among the human factions at any rate. But the Wardens of the White Tower are still a very accomplished infantry unit in their own right. And we also have some Pinneth Gaeling cavalry, some lancers. We'll see if they can be useful at all, or whether they'll just charge into the jaws of an enemy spear formation, and some Gondor cavalry without the armour upgrades as well. They're spear cavalry, so they do have a bonus against other cavalry, but don't let that fool you. They're still not the best in melee against other cavalry, to be honest with you, and it is certainly an area where Gondor are a little bit more fragile than other factions. We have Bloodbath McGrath, who's going to be playing as the Hobbits. We haven't seen the Hobbits in a little while, actually. It's a very nice sunset here over Lake Evendim, and the Hobbits are not too far away from home. Lake Evendim is not that far from the Shire in the grand scheme of things. Gandalf's Fireworks, this could be a very useful piece of siege equipment on this map. Again, the narrow engagement over on this side of the lake is perfect for this kind of artillery, because there's going to be no escaping the payloads as they come forward. Some battling brandy bucks, once again. Just a very basic unit of shock infantry, but the Hobbits, they're slippery little things. It'll be interesting to see how the enemy decide to engage the Hobbits. They're numerous and they're deadlier than they look, especially the farmers of Buckland. They've got a really nasty charge on them and more damage, wielding their farming influence. 2 units of them. Some Ents over here, as well as some Proudfoot Protectors, which are a very awkward unit to try and deal with. Crossbows at range, so very, very deadly. One of the ways you can normally deal with crossbows is to charge into them quickly with cavalry. You can't do that with the Proudfoot Protectors, though, because they are pikes in melee, so your cavalry will live to regret that very, very quickly indeed. A couple of units of Sheriffs of the Farthings. Again, as the Hobbits, you may as well bring them because they throw their pebbles and they can be decent for zoning out enemy cavalry. They're not exactly the finest quality of unit for this type, but they can still make life difficult. And honestly, being awkward and annoying is one of the ways that the Hobbits can conduct their business very effectively. However, there's nothing awkward or annoying about the Bjornings. They're just straight up very, very powerful. They are somewhat similar to Wargs, I would say, in the way that they do their business. They don't have very good armor values, but they do have several HP, so they do have a little bit of breathing space before their low melee defense and low armor starts to bite them, and they're also very damaging, of course. And the rest of the Hobbit army is almost certainly just hidden around here somewhere. Some Elders of the Elven King up there from Mark of the Knight, although I doubt that he's going to get the luxury of being able to use his archers over here. We shall see with the Silverthorn arrows. Thranduil is in that unit as well, so Mirkwood fighting alongside these units here. Elven King's Palace Guard, one of the deadliest units of infantry in the game. We'll see how useful they can be here, though. They should have the numbers of the Hobbits around them, so this could be the ideal pairing for Mirkwood in many ways. Hirilung, the heavy Elven Swordsman as well, very, very effective in melee with the high base damage and melee defense. Sindar the Girdle, quite a lot of cavalry on this side, I'd have to say, which is odd for a map like this, but if they send them all around the other side, they could be very effective, especially seeing as they've got sort of javelin cavalry, in quotation marks, in the shape of the Sheriff of the Farthings. They've got some Lancers and some Spear Cav in Gondor, the Bjornings for some of that X factor that you want, and the Sindar the Girdle as well are a very, very deadly unit in the current state of things in Reforged. Hiri Pang, there's more units up there as well, hidden, probably Woodland Realm Patrol or Wardens of Amon Lank. Hiri Alth and some Hiriak over here, and then the final army, which is over on this side, is going to be Numenor, actually, played by Little.s. Which means actually there's only one evil faction on display today on the other team, which will be Umbar, but we'll get onto them in a moment. Some upgraded Belagaya footmen, very basic spears, you know, the most basic units of infantry that Numenor have available to them. 3 units of them. Obviously they are cheap in comparison to a lot of other Numenor's other units as well, which we will start to get into now. Royal Legion of Armenlo, as you can see, those 20 extra unit models they have over the Wardens of the White Tower is a huge advantage that they have over most other units of this type. It puts them up and around the sort of effectiveness you'd expect from the Dwarven infantry of this type, which is a real mark of quality. Remen and Ardúchadar with their AP spears, very, very effective. We didn't actually see any Citadel Guard from Gondor, so interestingly enough, that's an area that Numenor are going to have to cover exclusively on this team. 3 units of Seafarers, big fan of them, of course, because of their huge missile damage with those javelins, and then the fact that they can muck in melee as well. And then we have some Pharazim Swordmasters, several units of Remena Abarim, so a very nice damaging core here, because the Remena Abarim for line infantry are very damaging indeed. And then of course the Pharazim Swordmasters, one of the scariest single units of infantry in the game. And then finally the Pharazim Nobles with Ar-Pharazôn himself there, another unit of very effective cavalry, melee cavalry at that, so they will be able to go around that way as well. And hopefully that's what the red team do, because all of this cavalry could be incredibly useful if they go around that way. It's a lot of it, but I think they have what it takes to hold this pass between their artillery and their defensive units as well. So we'll see what the blue team have brought to the field today to try and counteract that. They do have Exlop, that's interesting. We haven't seen him in quite a while, but it is going to be Linden. And actually this is pretty much the ideal counter to the Gandalf's fireworks that are across the way. We have a ballista, so that could be able to snipe that out, which will take away one of the deadlier tools which the red team have at their disposal. For Linden archers and Harlinden guard. Linden, of course, their low armour does hurt them quite a lot in a skirmish fight. I have to say in 0.97, that certainly seems to be the case in 0.97. In 0.96, you always felt like Linden, it didn't really hurt them as much as you'd expect. But now I think it does, which I think is right, because Linden is still strong in other ways, but their archers are still damaging, so as long as they get support from their allies quickly, their fragility to enemy archers shouldn't be too much of a problem. As long as they keep their pikemen out of range of it. They've got a lot of For Linden pikemen, but of course they will be horribly weak to arrow fire. For Linden Marines, another useful unit that Linden have at their disposal. Very deadly javelins, also combined with those spears, makes them a very multifaceted unit. I'd probably have brought the Mythlon Marines in this sort of battle though, where it's going to be quite narrow because they're a little bit better in melee. But the Mythlon Marines, or the For Linden Marines I should say, are still a solid pick. Harlinden infantry, you'll rarely see Linden come without them, because they are, for what they cost, a very efficient unit of line infantry in melee. And then of course the mighty Noldorin Guard and Noldorin Blade Masters as well. Like, arguably in terms of infantry killing power, this is the strongest unit of infantry in the game. So very, very powerful there from Linden. And of course the Horse Lords of Ulmo, so a largely quality focused Linden army, as perhaps you would expect. You can see that Corsair infantry on the front line here from Umbar, played by Katunka the Easterling. Probably a good choice for sending alongside the more fragile Linden skirmishers. They're not exactly too tanky themselves without their armour upgrade, but they do have a shield at least. And of course they're significantly cheaper, so it's not so much of a problem if they do die off. Lots of Balaketh marksmen here as well, who are ideally suited for skirmishing. Heavier armour, heavier chain, and of course those shields on their back as well. A combination of Belagaya pikemen and Elkarondas Legion here on the front line. Always nice to have. Naruna Aru Sentinels back here, forming up another line, as well as some Adunheim Shield Guard. And then way at the back we have some Harbingers of Castamere. Almost looks like two units, but it's just one unit that's spread out quite thinly, which is going to be where Castamere himself is another very strong unit of heavy swordsmen. Everyone's bringing that kind of unit today except Gondor, it seems. And actually there's some Warlords of Umbar back over here as well. So another unit of knights on the field. It'll be interesting to see how all this cavalry is used on a map like this. Then we come to the player who sent me the battle replay in Inarius, who's going to be playing as Imladris. He's got some Elder Runway archers over here, which of course are fantastic archers, as well as some Noritino warriors. Again, the skirmish fight is going to be really interesting here, because I really don't know, when there's so many factions that are going to be packed in to one rather narrow pass, it's going to be, it'll be interesting to see who comes out on top of that. It's rare to see the Noritino cavalry as well, so good to see them make a bit of an appearance. We also have some Elder Runway lancers, so some heavy lancers, really, really deadly, and of course cavalry like this does have a tendency to be strong enough to stand up for itself in melee as well, depending on its foe. If it's the Pharazim nobles, then they will still lose pretty heavily, but if it's something basic, they will be fine. Gwythi Rockdor, again, some of the strongest lancers in the game. Arguably the best unit of lancers all round. They aren't as fast or arguably as deadly off the charge as something like the Horse Lords of Ulmo, and they aren't quite as tanky at range as something like the Knights of Illuminus or Carmel's Dragon Knights, but the blend of everything together, the Gwythi Rockdor possibly are the strongest. Riders of the Broinen, nice unit of Elven Horse Archers, some Imladris Guardians, as well as some Imladris Sentries, lots of them as well, lots of Elven quality on display. Some Gwythi Arthan, the heavy spears, again very tanky indeed, not necessarily the fastest killers as I keep saying, but they will stand and fight for a long time. Elder Runway Spearmen, and more Elder Runway Spearmen, and then the final army on display today, going to be Lothlorien. So it's almost like Mirkwood has sort of thrown their toys out the pram somewhat and gone off to find some new friends, and the other elves are going to try and force them to come back to the fold. As Lothlorien, M1 Breakout, he's got some Lorenan Spears. We have some Blades of the Wood, very basic Lothlorien line infantry, but basic Elven line infantry is still strong. Lorenand Axeman, not so basic Elven line infantry, very strong of course. Lorenand warriors with a bit of AP, something the other Elven factions tend to lack in melee. Some Lothlorien Swordmasters as well for that extra base damage. Some Lorenand archers, obviously again like most heavy Elven archers, fantastic at range and also very competent in melee. We have some Kindred of Calaborn and some Elder Council, good to see the split shot here, and also the Riders of the Golden Wood with their Silverthorn arrows. So I'm not sure who's going to win this, to be honest with you. I think perhaps I would give the skirmish advantage somewhat narrowly to this side. They've got Umbar and to an extent Imladris to deal with the sort of the tankier nature, and then they've got Linden and Lothlorien to do some of the damage. The split shots are always a nice thing as well, but without further ado, let's begin. And it will be interesting to see who makes the first move here, because I feel as though this is going to be a very brutal fight. I mean, 21,000 frames for a 4v4 is not overly long. Again, this is a rather simple battle. Like, it's not as if anyone is going to sort of spend a lot of their time manoeuvring around. You know, it's a very simple matter to see how to engage on this kind of battlefield. Mirkwood are going to be coming down here, actually moving their cavalry more centrally, which again surprises me. It would really surprise me, honestly, if none of the factions on the field today decide to try and take advantage of the long way round. Because I feel as though that is something which, in my experience, both in playing and watching battles on this map, that has been a decisive factor several times. So for no one to try and do that will be quite interesting. You can see over here that the riders of the Broinen are moving forward. It is an interesting move to bring horse archers on a map this narrow as well, because horse archers can be relatively easily zoned out by foot archers, and it's not as if the red team are short on that kind of unit. So the riders of the Broinen coming up all on their lonesome over here are likely to be zoned out pretty quickly. Hobbitry and arms moving forward. Any kills the riders of the Broinen get on the red team on the approach forward could be useful, even if it's just against Hobbitry and arms, to be honest with you. Try and take away some of the manpower of the hobbits before they get into melee. Try and get over here. I mean, but I don't really know what they're going to accomplish here per se. One of the best things that the red team can do, though, is take advantage of this terrain feature here. They are closer after all, and they can take it more easily. So they will have a bit of high ground over here, which is perhaps why Imladris are trying to put pressure on it immediately. But of course the Sindar of the Girdle are going to move forward. This might be a good target to actually skirmish with the horse archers, though. The Sindar of the Girdle, it'll take a little while before you can actually start killing off unit models because of their multiple HP nature, but I would suggest that it's still worthwhile to do, because as soon as those hit points are gone, they don't have the best armor values, they are completely unshielded, and it is elven arrows you're pumping into them. So that's a decent amount of damage there, and the Riders of the Broinen are going to shoot into them. The Mark of the Knight is pretty slow to respond to this. I mean, quite a few of those arrows are missing, to be fair, so it's not the end of the world. Gondor cavalry posturing. Yeah, it's going to be, you know, with those elven horse archers there, perhaps it is less of an attractive proposition to try and take that high ground, but it's absolutely something that the faction that starts off on this side of the map needs to do, in my opinion. It's just too good a position to pass up. Makes you a little bit more open, but this is a battle that's going to be decided by a pretty lengthy skirmish fight phase, I would assume. Rise of the Goldenwood moving forward, another target which, if the red team are able to, they will absolutely try and skirmish them down. Again, multiple HP for the Riders of the Goldenwood, so not the easiest thing to do, but the Silverthorn arrows are a deadly enough thing that they will want to get rid of them, and also there are no pushovers in melee against other cavalry either, so getting rid of them from that perspective will also give the red team even more of a cav advantage than they already have, which between the Sindar of the Girdle, Bjornings and Farazim Nobles, they should already win the cav fight, to be honest. That is a very effective bunch of units. Sheriffs of the Farthings are there. What are they going to fire at? Well, here come the Silverthorns. They're going after the... Well, the Tookish Hunters are on the front line. They were actually going after the Gandalf's fireworks there. But the Silverthorn arrows are actually hitting the siege weapons themselves, not the crew. So not exactly the most useful use of that ammunition. The Gondor cavalry also came forward and actually caught out the Riders of the Goldenwood a little bit there. They were in melee for a little while anyway. It's not often you'll see elven horsemen running away from just basic Gondor cavalry, but here, this is where they will be able to get some kills. A couple of those Gondorian horsemen there falling away. Sheriffs of the Farthings moving forward once more, covering the advance of the Gondorians as they get in position. It's rather an interesting move to lead the way with the pikeman, but now with the blue team's horse archers pushed back just a little bit, they are going to try and take this hill with their own elven archers in the Hiri Peng from Mirkwood. A lot of those units hidden behind that hill there. Numenor bringing up the rear. Oof. And there you can see the ballista hitting the guards of Osgiliath, but I don't think the red team will mind this too much. Even if they do hit, they'll only end up getting 3 or 4 kills at a time, which is not ideal, but the ballista is an expensive thing. So using up all of its ammunition on just a single unit of guards of Osgiliath would not be an efficient use of its time, I don't think. Over here on this side of things, Linden taking up position over on the left-hand side, according to their orientation. Imladris taking the right, Umbar reinforcing both of them with their units just in behind, and then right at the back we have Lothlorien in the final wave. I can only imagine that this is going to be a fight where both sides are rather cagey at the start, trying to sort of make the engagement work as well as it can for them. But then as soon as things kick off, it will be very violent and very quick, actually, I would imagine, as the hobbits come forward barefoot, wielding those fence panels. Here Yi Peng trudging down the hill. We have up there Pinnithgale and Cavalry. Again, I'm really surprised, honestly. We can see actually that the blue team have decided to come around the side, and Wythie Rockdor, Elder Enway Lancers, and the Warlords of Umbar, so a lot of strength moving around here, and I'm surprised the red team are not contesting that side of things. But the blue team are, so they will be able to put some pressure on the rear lines now, which is good. They do have to be careful of all these stakes that are deployed around here. There's no rhyme or reason to the stakes really, but that's still something they're going to have to consider. Hobbitry and arms moving forward, but they're completely on their own, and they are getting shot up immediately by the Corsair infantry. Again, they're not going to be able to respond in kind to this kind of arrow fire, so not ideal from their perspective. Showing their backs to the enemy as well, which will take away their shield value, albeit those fence panels are not exactly the finest quality shields, but they help nonetheless. Ooh, hello. This will be a fairly decisive moment, I think, because the Gandalf's fireworks could be an incredibly useful unit to have in this situation. You can see the kills are being spread out throughout the army. Corsair infantry are taking losses, Lorinand archers are taking losses, Balaketh marksmen, the Imladris infantry corps is, even the Umbar infantry corps way back here is taking some hits. And this is the beauty of using the Hwacha or the fireworks, because you're not going to do extreme damage to a single unit of infantry like you might do with something like a Trebuchet or even the Dragon's Breath. But the amount of damage you do across the entirety of the enemy army can really add up over time. And without any sort of response here, it could be... it could get pretty grisly. The Ballista is here as well. I'm actually a little bit surprised. Is the Ballista even in range of the fireworks? I'm not quite sure. Ballista there, missing unfortunately for them once again. Going short and going long. Rather unfortunate there for Eggslot. Like, for me, the only use a Ballista really has is as a sniping out enemy artillery. Like, it's just not damaging enough in most situations. You can actually see as well that collateral damage, the Hwacha is actually able to destroy one of the ballista pieces, as well as doing a real number here on the Linden army. Corsair infantry and the Linden archers out front, but also the Linden pikes, the Linden marines, and the Linden line infantry, all taking hits. And 2 of the Elven ballistas are now gone, which is a bad start for the blue team, honestly. I was kind of expecting this ballista to be their saving grace against the Gandalf's fireworks, but in the end, it has proven to be anything but. And the red team certainly having a bit of an advantage when it comes to the artillery so far. And again, one of these rockets could very well hit the final ballista here. Oh, that was very lucky. Lucky there that ballista didn't break there. That brave artillery crewman took the blow for his piece. And now the Elven ballista is going to try and get out of here, but already lots of damage done. And the reason why I like this artillery piece is because you have 2 choices when you're faced with the Hwacha. Either you stand there, remaining in your defensive posture and take a bunch of damage, as Linden has done here, or you're forced into action. It's one of the things which forces something to happen, or it presents the team which is just sort of trying to sit back and take it with a big numbers disadvantage later on in the fight, which, honestly, in the face of this sort of thing, I'd have been tempted to sort of swing into action if I were the blue team. It's a pretty intimidating looking sight, this, but I do feel as though if you move forward quickly, like Linden should not be on the front line in my opinion. They should be the last line in because of their light armour. Corsair infantry moving forward, the Lorinand archers getting in position up here on the higher ground. This battle so far has got a bit of the Napoleon Total Wars about it, where sort of banks of infantry are setting up in position and are shooting at one another. These Loren-armed archers shooting into the Gondorian position up on this hill, but the Gondorians won't mind this too much. They do have those spears out in front with their shields pointing in the right direction. Although I think the Elven archers are probably going after the marksmen of Caer Andros that are just in behind them, which would be the real prize. Good armour even on the marksmen of Caer Andros though, so not the easiest units to kill even for heavy Elven archers. But it's still the sort of target that the Loren-armed archers will be victorious over in a skirmish fight. Hiri Peng moving forward. Tukish hunters also moving forward. The Gandalf's fireworks getting into a better position to shoot once again. I have to say, I like the way the red team are approaching this so far. They're leveraging their strengths as best they can. Ballista bolt shooting in there, getting some of the men in Nardukadar, but nothing too grisly. But yeah, the red team I think have started well. They're skirmishing decently with the enemy. They're sending their units forward. Their artillery has already done some good work. And if things continue as they are, they're going to continue to feel pretty good about the situation, I think, as the Tukish hunters continue to trade blows with the Corsair infantry. Ammunition-wise, the Corsair infantry don't have a ton of ammo, so that could end up being a problem for them. Forward come the Hiri Peng, so it's not just lower-end archers that the blue team are having to deal with. There's also Caer Andros marksmen and Hiri Peng making their presence felt. And the Hiri Peng are shooting in. They're going to try and shoot the ballista through. I personally think this is a bit of a mistake. They've already done... I think the ballista has already shown itself to not be as much of a threat as you might think a unit of artillery is. To be honest. Corsair infantry, so still. Archer versus archer. Forward comes the Pinnith Gaeling cavalry now. They're going to try and charge right into the front of the Corsair infantry, I think, but the Horse Lords of Ulmo are right there. This is going to end in tears for Clem if he continues this charge, and I think he is. He's just going to continue to go right on in here. This is not a fight the Pinnith Gaeling cavalry want at all. The Horse Lords of Ulmo are some of the deadliest knights around. And yeah, this is going to be the end of the Pinnith Gaeling cavalry. They're lancers as well. It's not as if they're spear cavalry and have a bonus against cavalry. This is a situation where they are at their very worst, and they are going to be dealt with very easily by the finest cavalry that Lyndon have to offer. They're going to try and get out of there. I'd be surprised if they didn't rout on the retreat. Oh no, they did stabilise. Decent morale on them, I suppose. But yeah, with the Silver Thorns and their Loren-armed archers shooting them, I am kind of surprised, honestly. Sheriffs of the Farthings moving out. Again, this is why I would have used the cavalry of the red team around the other side to try and contest the long way round, because as it is, all of the red team cavalry that stayed over here so far has just tried to charge forward and has mostly ended up being shot up unceremoniously, although the Bjornings up here have found a bit of an opening. And they're just going to continue their charge. They're going to get right on into the 4 Lyndon archers. They need to, I think, cycle out of here pretty quickly. They can do tremendous damage very quickly, the Bjornings. The Sheriffs of the Farthings, meanwhile, are going to take a charge from the Norretino cavalry and the Horse Lords of Ulmo. Fireworks going off, and now all of a sudden you can see that things are starting to kick into high gear. The snowball effect is underway. The Bjornings are taking close-range shots. The Riders of the Golden Wood are moving back out. Cavalry charges happening from both sides. Pinnith Gaeling cavalry have a bit of an opening now, but the Norretino cavalry is going to try and respond in kind after the charge on the Corsair infantry has already landed. Ultimately, though, I think the blue team will be kind of happy about this. Like, they didn't have all their cavalry over here, and they're still doing a pretty decent job. Whereas the red team's cavalry has been trying to cycle in, and ultimately I think they are struggling a little bit. Pinnith Gaeling cavalry are now routing, and you can see here Lil S is being a little bit too gung-ho, I think, and this is sort of prompting the rest of his team into action, but this worries me because you can see here that I appreciate the fact the red team are attacking, but they're not attacking with everything. Too many of their units are way too far away for my liking. If you're going to attack like this, you need your reinforcements very close by so you can just sort of continuously put pressure on and try and smash your way through defensive lines. As it is, though, you can see that the blue team are going to be able to swing into action here, and I think bring this under control. The Hiri Alth are going to be very easily able to deal with Corsair infantry on the front line, to be fair. And you can see that there are charges coming in. Charging in there to the Balaketh marksmen. A good charge from the Bjornings as well, albeit they have taken a few losses on their unit for now. Hobbits charging into melee, trying to take advantage of the damage already done to the Balaketh marksmen. There's a lot of Lyndon pikes in position as well, though. More and more of the red team are starting to pour forwards now. Elven King's Palace Guard are on the front line, so I mean that's a real statement of intent from Mirkwood as well. If they get spotted by all the blue team's archers, they will certainly be one of the foremost targets. But you can see over here that Mirkwood's aggression may pay off, albeit they're going to need a lot of support from their archers over here. Imladris definitely have the edge over them when it comes to just straight up heavy infantry. Sindar of the Girdle charging into the Balaketh marksman. It's chaos and pandemonium so far. Hiriak, let's actually go down to half speed to take note of all that's happening. Alcarondas Legion are heading to the front line. I mean, Linden over here are sort of getting a little bit overwhelmed on the front line as it stands. Imladris' section of the front line is holding on relatively easily, but there's more Mirkwood troops on the way forward. Woodland Realm Patrol are here. The rest of the Gondorian army now needs to come up as another wave and really try and hammer home a bit of an advantage here, because you can see here some of Numenor's troops are starting to break. Mirkwood are doing very well, I have to say, but the assault from the Hobbits and Numenor up on this side was absolutely abysmal. You can see that the Linden Pike line, combined with actually some of the Umbar pikemen as well, have held on very easily. The Lorien archers are up here on the hill as well, making life very, very difficult. That's not what Mirkwood would have wanted to see, because Mirkwood's been doing quite well so far. They're going to need the rest of this army to come forward now, and I think it is. But we shall see. I think it's about time we went back up to full speed. Victory seems certain for the Belagaya footman. Charging in. Hiriak, the balance of forces is evenly matched. A decent charge there into the spears by the Noritano cavalry. Again, basic as far as Elven cavalry goes, but they still have a very nice charge on them if you can deliver it without their fragile nature being taken advantage of. Lorenan Swordmasters moving forward with Elder Enway Spearmen, getting in there to the Sindar of the Girdle. Elder Enway Spearmen are also fighting hard, but they're taking some shots, but between the Imladris armour and large diamond shields, I think they should be just fine. Belagaya footmen heading back to the front line after returning from routing, but that's not going to last too much longer, I don't think, because they're taking a ton of arrow fire anyway. And they're also wavering, like they're going to rout as soon as they get into melee here, I think. Yep. A predictable result to that. But now, you can see over here, Warlords of Umbar forming up. The Imladris cavalry also on the way forward, so this is something that the red team are going to have to take into account. They do have their Pharazim nobles back here as well as their Bjornings, but those two units alone, especially as depleted as the Bjornings are, probably won't be enough to stop that blue team cavalry expedition as we move forward there. The red team, like their assault is just a little bit too strung out for my liking. Worrying times for them, I think. Remen and Ardukadar getting toward the front line, but this section of the line has held on so strong because there just hasn't been enough. Like, again, they've filtered in individual unit after individual unit. They're starting to send in a little bit more of a condensed force now, but it's too little too late, I think. And you can see here the Kindred of Celeborn causing havoc. Noritano cavalry moving forward. They're going to be able to charge in here to the Gondor archers, preventing them from firing as well as doing some damage. How are Mirkwood getting along over here? Mirkwood's still doing well. The damage that's been done by Mirkwood has been significant, and Numenor are also over here with a couple of their units. But Mirkwood are only really winning in the middle here against Imladris. They're still being told where to go pretty overwhelmingly, to be honest with you. Mirkwood never really stood a chance of breaking through here without significant missile support. The Elven pikemen from Imladris were always going to be a little bit too much for them to have to deal with. Defeat seems certain for the Lorenan Swordmasters. A lot of damage taken by them. Linden's 4 Linden Marines taking a lot of damage from all those archers in behind, which is the saving grace. The red team could yet pull this battle out just through sheer strength of their archers, but you could also say the same about the blue team. Neither side was a shrinking violet when it came to their strength at range. From Men and Ardukadar there, you can see some bandits from Bloodbath McGrath trying to get in position, but they are also immediately being shot up. Kindred of Celeborn are ready. Castamir's Rangers, that was a unit that obviously popped out from hiding. Body piercing, shooting into the bandits. The Ents are on their way forward, but this is a lot of reinforcements heading forward to the front line now for the blue team, which is bad news for the Reds, because any gains they may have made here in the middle at the hands of Mirkwood, they're likely to be able to roll them back here, the blue team. That there are some Silverthorns from the Elders of the Elven King shooting into that blob of Umbar infantry. The Alcarondas Legion taking some damage. Lorinand Axemen scurrying forwards to the front line. Oof, that's a lot of damage they're doing though. They're ripping right through the Harlingen Guard as well as some of the Umbar and Lothlorien infantry as well, so good damage. Meanwhile, over here the Gondor cavalry that was just retreated back here and then forgotten about by Gondor has been jumped on by all of the Imladris cavalry, and that's going to be the end of them, which this is a real problem for the red team. They're going to need to have something to hold these units at bay. You can see that they're actually starting to commit forward more units. I think they're just sort of, they're resigned to throwing the kitchen sink somewhat at the blue team's front line and hoping to smash it to bits. It's kind of difficult to gauge how well it's going. I mean, personally, I feel as though every time I see an assault which is strung out in the way that the red team's was here, I always feel as though they're kind of onto a losing thing, really. Especially with all of that fire coming from the Riders of the Golden Wood and the Kindred of Celeborn. Gondor spearmen moving forward in formation. The Ents are over here with the battling Brandybucks. That's a lot of hobbits that are pushing their way through the line, supported by the bandits, but the bandits are routing, unfortunately, just before the Gondorian infantry can get up in support. And Gondor spearmen are not going to be a match for Lorinand spearmen. Man, this is a real feast for the eyes when it comes to all of these bright projectiles. It really is like fireworks on the screen. Silverthorn arrows finding their way right into the heart of that Gondorian assault. It's no surprise really that the red team are doing best down this slope where the Lorien archers up on the hill there can't really get them. But even over here they're starting to run out of steam. Ever since that final reinforcement line came forward, things have started to look pretty bleak for the red team. Defeat is almost a certainty down here. Gondorian reinforcements heading down. Ones of Ammon Lank coming forward, but once again the Imladris front line down here nearest to the lake shore is just too strong. Over here, meanwhile, the Elven cavalry coming forward. Here are the Pharazim nobles. I don't know about this. I mean, one-on-one, it would be an interesting fight between them and the Gwaithir Rokdor, but not when they've also got Eldarenway Lancers in support. This is going to be pretty poor for the Numenor cavalry, and this of course will leave the Warlords of Umbar with free reign. Still some Pelargir Marines here in the back line, but they're just going to have to hope that their javelins do damage before they inevitably get trampled, which I find somewhat difficult to believe that will be the case. The vast majority now of the Numenor and Gondor armies are on the front line, but I don't know if it's going to be enough. I mean, they're inflicting big damage. Both sides are really slaughtering one another en masse at this point, but I just feel as though the positioning of Lorien skirmishers, the damage they did, the fact that the initial assault from the red team was a little bit stretched, I feel as though that could ultimately end up being the deciding factor. Gondor and Numenor together though, where Mirkwood did some work in before, they're now trying to complete the job, although with Noldor and Guard plugging the gap, it's going to be easier said than done for them to achieve that. You can see there in the background that the Pelargir Marines have just been charged, which is bad news for them. I can't imagine they're going to stand up too well to that sort of thing. Pharazim nobles are here. Perhaps with the support of the Pelargir Marines in melee, that's what they need, but that's kind of the problem. They don't really have any answers to this cavalry over here. I just feel as though this was a battle less about micro and more about the macro picture, and I just feel as though the blue team they had a better plan from a macro perspective in this battle. The Ents, though, are doing damage over here, and suddenly this part of the front line over here is not looking so great. The Harbingers of Castamere are here. Longbottom mob are throwing their pebbles in. Pebbles against the split shot of the Kindred of Celeborn. Yeah, that cavalry. When you see knights flanking around you getting sort of big rear charges, that's always a bad sign. There's still Bjornings though. Sheriffs of the Farthings are going to be able to try and do some work. But Warlords of Umbar and Gwaithir Rokdor certainly not the easiest foes to face. Pharazim Swordmasters charging in, going toe-to-toe here with the Lorinand warriors backed up by the Linden Pikes, and they are winning, the Pharazim Swordmasters. It goes to show just how deadly they really are. Arrows flying back and forth still. I don't know, you know. The numbers that they sent forward have been pretty impressive, but I mean, you just have to look over here. Imladris still very dominant down here. Although I say that, victory seems certain. The Elves of the Elven King have been committed to melee over here, but so too have the Gwaithir Arthan. The Imladris sentries are here, the Horse Lords of Ulmo. I mean, both teams at this point have really just slammed their armies together in one big blob. And I have to say, actually, along most points along the front line now, ever since Numenor have arrived, and the Ents, the blue team are losing. Even with stuff like the Noldorin Blade Masters over here, the overwhelming force, like, this is the thing, like, these Warlords of Umbar and the Elven Cavalry that was flanking around can't afford to mess around with the units back here. They need to rear-charge this front line and do damage. Like, between the Warlords of Umbar, Elder Runway Lancers and Gwaithly Rockdor, they have all of the shock potential there they need to just destroy this front line from the red team. But if they leave it as is, the red team could very well win just through sheer attrition. Numenor and Gondor, but especially Numenor with all the quality they brought today, are especially well suited for this kind of warfare, and they're doing very well for themselves, I have to say. Just more of those split shots coming in there. Another charge from the Warlords of Umbar. The red team doing the right thing by sending individual units back to try and stop them. Try and stop them getting those big, beefy rear charges in. But the Gwaithly Rockdor are doing that over here. Horse Lords of Ulmo are also doing that now as well. So Lyndon have managed to find a way to get their cavalry in. I think they moved them around here, to be honest with you. And that does, of course, mean that we're starting to see a little bit more in terms of breaking from the red team now. And I think this is the difference here, because the red team, I think if things had carried on how they were going, through sheer might, they would have actually won that. But with all of this cavalry, all of these cavalry charges going on from several units of really devastating knights, I think that's going to be all she wrote for them. The Pharazim nobles are trying to run damage control up on this section of the line, but the Warlords of Umbar have already done so much damage here. Look, Romena Abarim now running for the hills. Still a lot of hobbits up there, but hobbits in melee are not really what you want against Lorien troops. There's also Harbingers of Castamere over here. I mean, this is a very chaotic fight now. There goes Thranduil. A kinslaying once again, slain by his elven cousins. Marksman of Caer Andros still trying to do some damage. The Lorien Archers up on this hill must have racked up a very impressive kill count. Riders of the Golden Wood and Kindred of Celeborn, look at that. You could say in terms of what they actually do, the Kindred of Celeborn are like a poor man's ranger. But I disagree. I really like the Kindred of Celeborn, even if they are not exactly the most stable addition to the game. Gwaithly Arthand here, the hardcore to the Imladris force. You can see that the Wardens of Amon Lank and the Elves of the Elven King doing their best, but at this point they're being overwhelmed. The charges here have been really significant. And in the end, well, there goes another general. Indeed. Oof. Trying to kill off some of the Wardens of the White Tower. They're not the easiest foe to take on, however. And still here in the middle, where a lot of the higher quality Gondorian and Numenor troops were, they're still giving the blue team's line a real fight. What have we got going on over here? The Ents are still alive, making a nuisance of themselves, getting into the back line, trying to silence these archers. But if they wanted to silence the archers and the artillery, they should have done so a long time ago. It's a little bit too little, too late for that now. This section of the line has started to fall apart completely for the red team now. There's really not much left. The Noldorin Blade Masters managed to hold on. They and the Harbingers of Castamere managed to hold on in this situation where it was looking pretty dicey for a little while there, but in the end the cavalry charges did bail them out. Lorinand Archers, some Blades of the Wood. We've not really seen them in action today, but they must have been because there's only 8 of them left. Marksmen of Caer Andros will now probably be engaged in melee as well. Forward come the Dunedain Rangers in melee for the Hobbit folk. They're going to try their best, but of course, you know, not really up to the task of killing off Harbingers of Castamere. Mass routing at this point, and again, it just comes down to the cavalry. Horse Lords of Ulmo over here pulling out those curved elven blades, causing panic and pandemonium on the front line once again. The Ents are still trying to make something happen, to be fair to them, but they're up against Lorinand warriors now, and of course, if trees fear one thing, I'm sure it's a big, hefty two-handed axe. And those elven warriors should be more than sufficient to deal with what's left of the Ents as they continue to run around trying to get kills. Riders of the Broinin now moving forward, trying to chase down. I mean, at this point, it really is just a matter of playing whack-a-mole with all of the remaining units that the red team have at their disposal, using your cavalry, just swarming forwards with your infantry and scouring them from the field. Riders of the Golden Wood going back here to kill off the Turkish hunters. They need to be careful of the Proudfoots, to be fair. Both at range and in melee, those pikes will be not the nicest thing to try and take on, but Riders of the Broinin running down these long bottom mob. Those wooden clubs are not going to be sufficient to save them in this case. A lot of routing from the hobbits at this point, as well you would expect. All sorts of Ulmo making their way up here. Players starting to admit defeat now. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. There's still some fighting going on back here. The Ents are still here. The Warns of the White Tower, or their tattered remnants at the very least, are still fighting hard, but the armour piercing from those Lorien troops, backed up by the solidity of those Imladra spearmen, should be enough to see that done. The Gondorian player admits defeat also. The hobbits are running every which way they can at this point. I don't know what's left. There's still an Ent over there. There has to be a little bit more than that, surely. Yeah, so Mirkwood and the hobbits are still fighting, but that won't last too much longer, I don't think. Proudfoot Protectors are now routing. That's the end of the hobbits. Is it? Yeah, it must be. They killed off the Ents. So the hobbits are gone, which means Mirkwood? Do they have anything left? I don't know if they do. Rise of the Goldenwood are there, but I mean there's... Oh no, there is Hobbitry in Arms. There goes Samwise, cut down by the elves. Yeah, they saw the final unit there. Riders of the Goldenwood charging in, routing off the Hobbitry in Arms with instant effect. What is left? Gondor Spearmen? Nothing there. Units just routing all over the field at this point. Close though, it was within 10%, so it does go to show how violent that particular battle was. But in the end, I think well deserved. I think just the execution of their game plan was better by the blue team, and just their game plan as well as a whole was actually better for reasons I'll talk about on the results screen. So yeah, I think well deserved. A brutal battle though on the shores of Lake Evendim, and in this case,
our soldiers have fought and died well today.
The primary Elven alliance, as I'll call it, against Mirkwood's ragtag band. In the end, you know, the faction with the more elves won there. You can see a lot of kills, but you'd expect that because this team had significantly more men deployed, between the hobbits and Gondor especially. But yeah, as I was saying, like, I feel as though this battle was won or lost based on the cavalry, because I feel as though the red team did not make use of their cavalry in an adequate way. Like, they just charged it right into the front of the defence, which in places had a decent effect, but for the most part the blue team were just able to counteract it relatively easily, whereas the sort of the flanking force from the warlords and both units of Imladris' higher tier lance cavalry units, they were able to come around, and with relatively little resistance they were able to start charging into the back lines, which honestly, you know, if not for that, the red team may very well have won that fight, because it looked like when Gondor and Numenor arrived on the front line, they started to actually outmuscle and overpower the blue team. So yeah, I mean, if the Bjornings, Pharazim nobles, if they had just, even if they just left them defensively, they didn't necessarily have to send them all the way around. If they just left them defensively and didn't just allow the cavalry to come in and charge away at what it would in the background, that may very well have made the difference. It would have been a lot closer anyway. I mean, it was already within 10%, so it would have made it very close indeed. And yeah, I feel as though it still would have been difficult though. Lothlorien's archers in particular are in such a good position. The Kindred of Celeborn, the Riders of the Goldenwood, and even just the regular Lorien archers must have racked up quite a kill count. M1 Breakout was the player on the field with the highest amount of kills after all. But yeah, in the middle I thought Mirkwood did quite well considering the rather tough situation they were in. They went through the middle and they were performing quite well against Umbar and Linden. Less so right next to the shore of the lake itself against Imladris. Inarius was a little bit more comfortable in melee against Mirkwood for most of the fight. And even when he started to falter with less men, when Gondor arrived on the scene, that was when the cavalry arrived to bail them out anyway. So yeah, I mean, that's the difference. I think it was less about micro. I feel as though the attack from the attackers could have been a little bit better executed. It was a little bit stretched, so that's another way the attackers could have improved. But I feel as though the main thing was the macro sense of this battle, and the fact that the cavalry was just used. The plan for the cavalry was better, and the execution of that plan was better, significantly better, I would say, by the blue team. The red team didn't do badly by any means. Like, their plan overall was just worse. Their execution of their plan was okay, but the use of their cavalry was always going to be difficult, charging into that many archers, that many javelins, that many pikes and spears that the blue team had on their front line, especially on a battlefield as narrow as this. But yeah, I think everyone did quite well. Good to see some familiar faces back. Like, it's been quite a while since I've seen Exlop in a battle, so it's good to see him. It's been a little while, I think, since I've seen M1 Breakout in a replay as well, but these are names that I do recognise. Lil.S is a name that I don't. I think I have seen Clem before, but very, very few times in the past, I would have to say. But yeah, let's see what did the damage from Ladris, though. Yeah, 330. The Gwythi Rockdoor definitely, along with the Eldorenway Lancers, they were the two most significant units from Ladris, along with Umbar's Warlords, because they were the flanking force, and they were ultimately the primary difference makers in this particular battle. Decent performances from all the cavalry, even the Noritano cavalry, to be honest with you, was not bad, used in a more defensive light against the frontal cavalry charges from the red team. The rest of their army, like, again, they were primarily, to be fair, these numbers are fairly low for Elven Imladris infantry in particular, but you have to say that they were up against Mirkwood's infantry. So, I mean, they were up against smaller units anyway, and they were up against units of decent quality, even though they were winning. It's not a lot of kills that you're going to pick up against units like Hiri Alth and Hiri Lung. So, with that in mind, the Elven infantry here did just fine, but obviously Imladris' cavalry was the thing that did the best for them. And I would say that for archers, Lothlorien were the most significant advantage, whereas Linton and Umbar, they just had to be the centre and do the ugly job essentially of the blue team, but they did it well. So yeah, big thanks to all the players, to new and old faces alike. Big thank you to Inarius as well for sending me this battle replay. It was a nice one to behold. Lots of aggression, no messing around, everyone just getting right down to business, and that's what I like to see. Next, I'm not quite sure. Like, I did put up a poll earlier today, so that'll date when I recorded this video. Sin's going on and offline quite a lot, I notice. But yeah, like, I did put up a poll asking about 1212 AD content. Like, obviously the campaign alpha was released somewhat recently, and I was going to play a campaign on my own time. Like, I have been somewhat reluctant to do campaigns in the past. To be fair, the only campaign I've really shown before was in Shogun 2 with the mod for Shogun 2, which expands it greatly as the Mori. And I actually really enjoyed that campaign, and I actually only stopped doing it because the mod updated in a big update partway through doing it. And that made my save file incompatible, so I actually couldn't continue it, which was a real shame because I was not that far away from becoming Shogun and having to deal with the realm divide as the Mori. But again, like, I've always been a little bit reluctant to do campaigns because it's a lot of work to do the campaigns for not a lot of reward, to be honest with you, because I do feel as though there's diminishing returns from a campaign. Like, you might get a decent amount of views when you put up part 1, but by the time you get to like part 20, you're down to like 10 people watching it, and it's kind of disheartening to see those sort of numbers considering what I normally get. But yeah, I mean, it's something I'm considering. If nothing else, I might do some Medieval 1212 multiplayer battles, possibly. I feel as though that could be on the cards, because I do like Medieval 1212. Like, mechanically, there are some issues that it's not really with 1212, it's more with Attila that I have those issues with. And it's not just the optimization for PC, it's just some of the fundamentals about Attila that I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of. But 1212, aesthetically, I think is absolutely brilliant. They've done an excellent job on that, and just the themes that you can have going on there, I think are pretty intriguing. But we'll see. I mean, again, like, if I'm going to start something new, if I'm going to try and branch out, it will probably be within the winter break, because I just won't have the time or energy to dedicate to doing anything new when term starts up again. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's kind of dependent on what people think. Like, the poll, I think, will let me know a little bit about what I'm going to do. But obviously, for the most part, I will still be continuing with the regular programming, as it were. Maybe try and get a little bit more Silmarillion in. I understand that there's going to be an open alpha for Silmarillion that opens up, I think, on Christmas Eve. So hopefully we can start to get some more regular content with regards to Silmarillion out. Because at the moment, I'm only really showing content that J Monster wants me to show. Because obviously, you know, that's the stuff which will sort of showcase the ideas for the mod best, and that's the way I would like it. You know, I would like to sort of just show off what they would like me to. But when the open alpha comes along, obviously it's a little bit different. Then everyone sort of has like an opportunity to play it, and it's a little bit more open season, as it were. So yeah, there's a few things that could happen, but you know, we'll see. Like, the next thing that I do will probably end up just being another Reforged replay, because like I said, I'm just trying to work my way through a backlog. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.